Hi, I'm Thanh Pham, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to a productive conversation. It's me, Mike Vardy, and I am back with Thanh Pham of Asian Efficiency for part 2 of our conversation, diving into the many years that we have spent in the productivity and time management arena. If you thought part 1 was full of insights, we're going to dive even deeper in this episode. We'll continue our exploration of the productivity and time management arena. We talk about AI. Thanh turns the tables on me a bit, and we start asking questions of each other. We'll continue the exploration, and I'm really excited about drawing on our combined years of experience, kind of share more unique perspectives, stories, and invaluable lessons. Now, remember, productivity isn't just about managing time. We've talked about this before. In fact, I don't think you can manage time. You can only manage your relationship with time. It's about making time meaningful, and the relationship is what does that. So let's dive right back into part 2 of my conversation with Thanh Pham here on A Productive Conversation. Enjoy. And it's interesting you talk about those 3 things, time, health, and money. I mean, we've both been lucky in that we started our businesses at ages where we were able to do all that stuff, and we were earning money to be able to allow us to do things like, my wife and I were just in Lisbon at the Running Remote conference only a few weeks ago. And we were able to, we literally and you've been to Lisbon before, right? So you know how hilly that is. Well, we were able to walk those hills. Well, 30 years from now, not so much, because I'm 49 this year. So, and phases of life change things. But what's interesting is money, I think, and this comes up a lot, I think, when I'm talking to people about making choices and, you don't need to do that. They're like, well, yeah, but I have to pay for this or I have to pay for that. Number one, I think there's an inherent value on money that goes beyond what money is valued as. So, for example, people are more than willing to compromise their health more than necessarily, I can't afford this house. I've got this mortgage, so I'm locked in. I'm like, well, move. But I can't. I have or go do this. Well, I can't. And a lot of things they also, like with time in some instances, they don't calculate that a lot of the places that you could go to, maybe not necessarily in North America, but certain parts of the world, don't cost as much as you'd like to think. You could do a lot with very little money in these places, especially if you're younger. And we've seen that with digital nomadism. But in my age range, that I think that especially as the kids get older, because my daughter's graduated high school this year, my son's becoming a teenager, the window for that is right now. And money is not as much of an object as you think. What do you think? When someone is struggling with this and money comes up, because it will, it's something that we can quantify more than health, even more than time, because as I said, we're terrible. How do you help them break past that barrier? How did you help yourself break past that barrier? I mean, was that something you had to worry about?
Well, when I first started, I definitely had to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a really good book called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. I don't know if you've heard of the book.
I'll write it down.
Basically, the premise of the book, and Bill actually lives here in Austin. I've met him a few times, a really great guy. But he talks about the utility value of money. So the example that he gives in the book is, Mike, if I asked you, what do you think is the average age of somebody receiving a inheritance? Just take a guess.
55?
55? Okay. So it turns out to be roughly 61. Right. So imagine at 61, you get from your parents $1 million. By the time you're 61, you already have a house. You're already kind of set up in life. You probably already have a retirement fund. That money, even though it's great in theory, really doesn't do much for you.
Right.
But his point is, imagine you're going to give away $1 million, right, that you save up for your kids. What if you gave your kid, when he or she is 30 years old, $150,000, like US dollars, right? Mm-hmm. That could mean a down payment on the home. That could mean a world trip for them, for their family or something. And you give them another 150,000 when they're 40. So that could be like, for college or however education will look in the future, right? But his point is, money has different utility value at different stages of life.
Absolutely.
Instead of waiting until the end, what if you give it in spurts? Because you can use that at different stages of your life for a different utility. And this book came out maybe less than 2 years ago, but that's kind of like the shift I've had over the last 5-6 years as well, is to realize like more money is great, but it's not going to do everything. However, there's certain utility value that we can get now, because just like, you went to Lisbon recently. If you went to Lisbon 10 years ago, it would have been a different experience with your wife. And if you went 20 years ago, it would have been a different experience. And if you will go 10 years from now, it will be a different experience as well.
Yep.
Just because even though it's the same city, you're older, you're wiser, you have maybe more resources, your health is going to be different. And so I think we're a lot more aware now, at least I am, of like, what is the utility value of our time that we have today, of our money, of our health and resources that we have. Because traveling when we're 20 and have very little money is a different experience than traveling when we're 40, when we have,
More money.
more money and maybe the same amount of time or even less time. And thus we might cherish the experience a lot more.
And it gives you more choices. Like, so for example, going to Lisbon, we paid for our seats to have seat selection on our plane. Why? Because we didn't want to be jammed in seats for that long flight from Vancouver to London, because we are like 45 and, in the mid 40s, and you don't want to necessarily be cramped in those situations. But that choice meant, okay, we're spending this much here, and we're good with money, but it leads to other choices. Okay, so we're going to do this here. Well, what does that mean here? One of the things I did was we were in Porto, and there is just across the river, there's the village that, is where all the port's from. And I did a couple of port tours, and we did a flight at one, but then the other, they had a 1974 port at Graham's. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I was born in 74. I know it's related to the Portuguese Revolution. I'm literally looking out over this river, seeing it looks beautiful. I'm going to spend the money on this single glass of port, which was not inexpensive, but that's an experience that I would never, be able to do when I was in my 20s. And honestly, later, I don't know that, I almost this was the perfect time to do it. Like, it was the ideal time to do it. And I think that responsiveness is part of that. I think that when we talk about things like productiveness and improving relationships with time and efficiency and effectiveness, which I believe are like byproducts of productivity, I think maybe that's where it is they're not the part of it. They're the after effect. They're the effect. Like, if you're aligning, like you said, happy people are productive people. Well, if you're productive, then you're going to be more efficient. You're going to be more effective. So that's the byproduct. But I think we're seeing, and even with some of the words you're using, words like intensity, cadence, pacing, there is, as we get older or we heighten awareness, and we've spent, we've spent a good chunk of our lives in this field, you gain that wisdom, that understanding, that perspective of, okay, we're never going to get it all done because we will eventually not be here. So let's get the right stuff done. And we don't need to get to the point where we burn ourselves out along the way. Because I think that's the other thing is, and we don't necessarily need to use the shiniest, fanciest tool along the way either. And we've seen evolutions of, look at the bullet journal. That's an evolution of paper planning. The analog cards by Jeff Sheldon from Ugmonk, that's essentially an evolution of the hipster PDA that Merlin Mann put together, or Dash Plus by Patrick Rohn. What I love about spending so much time in the space and talking to somebody who spent time in the space is that we've seen a lot, but there's always the underlying thing and the underpinning stuff that hasn't really changed. And it's ultimately, we got stuff to do that we need and want to do. Let's just try to find a way to do that so that we can have contentment and lean more towards happy than miserable, right? Because, and if you're not happy, then you're not going to be productive. So you need to change what's going on so that you can be, lean in the other direction. And that may mean making some tough choices, right?
I think you hit the nail here, because a lot of things that we do when it comes to prioritizing, making changes in our life, comes down to making trade-offs. And I think as more people learn about productivity and study it and do it as well, they realize it's really a matter of trade-offs that we make. If we say yes to one thing, we also say no to other things. And what are we okay with? And I think coming to that realization of, yes, I'm going to drink this port here in this beautiful country, in this beautiful setting that will cost me X amount of, Canadian dollars, is a choice that you made, because then you would say no to, other things that you wouldn't spend money or time on. Right. And I think when people come to us and they need help for, getting stuff done and figuring out ways to meet their deadlines and stuff, they just have a really hard time saying no. And they have a hard time saying yes. And then at the same time saying no to other things. And that's why I'm a big fan of the book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. Right? He calls it like time management for mortals. Mm-hmm. And, one of the main ideas from the book is that he talks about that we don't have to get everything done on our to-do list. That's a losing game. You're never going to get everything done. You have to be okay with just picking a few things to do, and everything else you're just going to say no to.
Yep. Simple as that. There's another great book by Dr. Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings, because that's the other thing, is deciding to stop doing things because, and he uses this analogy of, the rose bush. And if you let all the roses try to grow on a rose bush, it comes out okay. But if you cut blooms that could very well flower so that others will bloom greater, that's how you get a truly amazing rose bush. So you're pruning through the art of decision making, of saying yes to things, saying no to things. The key is, and this is not something you can check off. This is a practice or a process, I believe, is getting better and constantly cultivating your understanding of what should I be saying yes to versus saying no to. And that's ultimately prioritization, right?
One thing I'm curious about, Mike, something you and I haven't really talked about, is what is your take on AI? Because now that things are, heading towards that, you and I have been around for a long time.
Yep.
You just mentioned how there's a different evolution of different things of what happened in the past. So, this is obviously non-scripted for those who are listening.
No, this is good. This is good.
I'm curious what your take on this is, and is it a remix of something that we did in the past?
I think we've been using AI for a long. I think the fear of AI is largely unfounded because we've been using AI for a long time. It just hasn't been as transparent, right? Like if you're using, I remember pulling a map out of our glove compartment and looking to see directions to where I want to go. And now you just say where I want to go into your phone and it gives you directions. Most people go, yeah, but that's just GPS. Yeah, but if you yourself know a better route, because you are familiar with the area, like, oh, I don't want to turn right at this left at this light because I'll be stuck at the intersection. I want to turn right because then I won't get stuck in traffic. That's you. That's AI telling you to do that. That's artificial intelligence. And then it's your own personal experience that's going, that's not the best choice for me. And I think that's ultimately what we will be doing. It's going to be curation. I think AI, and I did this at a talk. I was at a workshop. I did a talk, and then after, the biggest problem, and I know you've seen this too, with people when they're looking at their to-do list, is their to-do list isn't broken down small enough. They're looking at these big tasks, and they just stay on their list because they don't. And they said, well, I don't, I know what the multiple steps are. And I'm like, okay, but you knowing that doesn't free you up to actually get them done. What if you could delegate somewhere? And they're like, yeah, but that takes time. And that's when I pulled out chat. Like this was in the early days of Chat GPT. I pulled out my phone and I actually had it. It's one of the few websites I actually had saved as add to home screen on my iPhone. And I said, give me a task that's a pretty big task and I'll enter it in. And I actually entered it in for him. He told me what it was. It was something to do with home insurance or something. And I said, break this task down into its smallest components. And he watched it. And this is what I love about Chat GPT in particular. It isn't so much how quickly its response is, it's how it responds, because it does it like line by line. So you get that constant dopamine of delight that's happening because like, oh my, because if it just flashed on the screen, that's one hit. But you're getting like it's like this scroll. And the look on this gentleman's face of like, oh wow. And I'm like, now, I said, so here's the list. Now, this list is probably not 100% correct because it doesn't understand the nuances of your business. I said, but if you could do this, will that save you time? Will that free you up to do the things that only you can do? He's like, absolutely. Like he goes, now I can delegate. I know I can see. I'm like, great. So basically what I think AI is helpful with is breaking down these projects into the processes involved, which then frees you up to do more qualitative productivity, which is the key. That's the stuff I think that we get stuck with. Is it's way easier to get to inbox zero because you can count the numbers down, right? Like, oh, I got my email from 56 to 0, but I didn't write anything for that report. So I think that AI is nothing. It's not something to be feared. It's something to be, obviously, I mean, you don't want to just give, it's not an all or nothing proposition. I think there's useful elements to it. In terms of whether or not it's something that we've seen already, sort of, because when you look at tools that are able to group things by perspectives and things like that, and filtration, those are forms of artificial, like it's very rudimentary artificial intelligence, but it's the person putting it in. Like, I want to see all the things that fit into this time block. Here it is. Sunrise did that, right? Like what? So I think it's been happening. This is just where we can really, I think it's just taken a huge leap. The thing is making sure that we don't do the very thing that we've done with so many elements and go, let's put all our trust in it, because that's what happened with productivity. I mean, I wrote about this in the productivity diet as well, but the idea that productivity wasn't always about quantity. It was about making. And then as time went by, it still was about making, but they added that little twist of like, especially a lot of it. And then what happens is, well, when you make more things, if you don't have a way to make sure that they're good, is it valuable? Is it as valuable? And so I think that AI will help us make more valuable things as humans, as the way we can only do them. But how that happens, how that unfolds, that's the thing I'm really interested in seeing. So yes, I mean, it's fascinating. Like I said, that look on that gentleman's face was like, oh, I've got something here when I showed him that, because that's a big barrier. Like, I don't have time to do that. Well, you don't need to worry about that because you just put it in. So your time is now spent editing, curating, auditing, judging, curating, that kind of thing, as opposed to doing. Right. And then when you can do that, then you can go, okay, well, now I'm going to pass this off. And I mean, when it comes to virtual assistants, people are going to be like, well, AI can do all that stuff now. I'm like, yes and no. It can do a lot of that stuff for you. I mean, we've been using, you and I both have scheduling links. That's AI. That's really AI. It's just so now it's like, well, now, it can respond to emails. It knows exactly what response to. Yes, but you still need somebody to look at it. You still need that Toyota supervisor that's watching to see and then can pull the lever if the assembly line's broken. Like, you still need someone on the comms. It's just a matter of what they're monitoring, not necessarily what they're doing. So that frees them up to do the things that only we can do still really, really well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think your point of allowing AI to make more stuff, or allowing humans to make more stuff, I think is a really good point, because the way I think about it is, and the best analogy I can give is, in the beginning, we had to use our head and brains to make mathematical formulas and figure out how that worked. And then we had the calculator, and the calculators sped things up for us, right? And make things a little easier. And then we had Excel, which made things even easier and faster. But just because we had those tools and those upgrades in technology, it didn't mean that we got rid of, accountants or CPAs, right? We actually got more creative in terms of the problems that we could solve and the things that we could create and the models that, we now have that would have taken, years and years to do now that we can do in seconds. And I think AI allows us to do that in many ways as well, where we can be more creative in terms of how we do stuff and what we can create and how fast we can create something. But there's still that human element aspect to that, well, right? Like you were saying.
Yeah, but I think that the other key thing that we have to remember is that humans should still know how to do math, right? Like, that's the thing, because I think, like, I can tell you that I was never like, when we were taking exams, there were certain things you weren't allowed to bring in, right? You had to be able to do the math. Like, you had to show that you understood it. You had to show that you could calculate. Now it's like, first off, there's new math, which is hard for most of us to understand that didn't take it. But it adds up, no pun intended. But you should be able, like, it's the same thing we've seen with cashiers, right? Like making change, right? Well, cash transactions, some people just are like, well, hey man, it's $20 minus, like they don't know how to do it as quickly as, say, people of an older generation. But that problem might be solved when we go cashless, right? Or when we have less cash transactions, because it becomes an anomaly when someone walks in with a $20 bill to pay for Starbucks as opposed to just tapping their phone. No math required. The machines are doing it. That's the thing that people get freaked out about. They're like, well, what if we take our hands off the wheel or eyes off? That's the thing. Don't take your eyes off the road. Keep things, like, our job will be to essentially, and I mean, you could go way back to like the whole idea of education with Carnegie and the whole, all that stuff where it's like we were basically training people to go work in factories. Now we're just going, okay, the things that will be doing that will be AI, and the humans will supervise it. But let's make sure that we're actually supervising and not just going off to the beach for, 2 weeks at a time and letting the robots run everything. I think that's the big fear. I think it's unfounded. I think but I think it's a cautionary tale that people need to, again, you want to be able to know that if the machine went down, that you could still make change, that you could still count in your head, okay, well, what's, 73 minus 36? You want to be able to do that. But the ability to have choice and have options is always ideal. And I think that's what AI gives us, especially when it comes to, and we're actually going to see, what's interesting is I think we're going to see those who don't embrace it, they'll find out that they need to have it in some way, shape, or form at some point, because ultimately it will lead to, why aren't we making enough money? Why is our bottom line? Well, because we've got AI doing this stuff that's saving us manpower, and now our manpower is doing this. So yeah, we're making more money, or our revenue, our bottom line, or our P&L is better because of that. They're like, oh, well, why don't you have it? Well, we didn't really want to trust AI with this. We didn't want to do that. Well, there's going to be there's going to be a balance. It's not going to be like, let's not use AI at all, or let's go all in. There's going to be a balance. And like with anything that's balanced, it's never 50-50. It's always dynamic, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you have a CPA who uses calculators now and you have a CPA next to them that uses Excel, I'm going to go with that CPA that's going to use Excel.
Sure. As long as the formulas are set up correctly.
Right. Exactly.
That's the key.
Right.
That's
So we still have to learn how to use the tools, right? And that's why I think, you as a writer will appreciate this. Good writing to me is really a reflection of clarity of thought.
Yes.
And so if you're using tools like ChatGPT, computer science, I remember reading those books back in the day. They always talked about garbage in, garbage out. If you put bad stuff in, you're going to get bad stuff out. Mm-hmm. And same thing is true with tools like ChatGPT. If you don't have clarity of thought, like if you don't know your vision, if you don't know how to delegate, if you don't know how to put it in words, the machine, even though it's extremely powerful, can't do much unless you have clarity of thought. And that's something that we have to still, learn: logical thinking, clarity of thoughts, mental models, decision-making frameworks. Like, these are all things we can still learn and upgrade every single day as humans that then empower the machines to help us do better work and create better quality work.
Well, and an example would be the prompts that you would throw in ChatGPT. If you write a blog post about productivity, you're going to get a pretty shitty blog post, and it's going to look, but if you write a long prompt about it, which people are doing, you might get better. Now, here's the thing. Will you understand it? Will you, as the writer, because writing is also a form of not just clarity, but you're learning along the way, right? Like, whenever I write something, I'm always like unpacking it during the process of writing it. So it's not, and again, nuance, like, yes, you can put into ChatGPT, write a blog post in the style of Thanh Pham, or in the style of Mike Vardy, or in the style of Asian Efficiency, and they'll look at our stuff online because it's there and go, oh, well, this is how that would look. The question, there's a couple questions around that. Number one, formulaic writing isn't necessarily engaging writing. And secondly, you'll have to fact check. There's a lot of people that are missing that right now. And then I think the other thing is an integrity factor. Like, I know that I would not want to necessarily. I have used ChatGPT to give me ideas as a springboard, but I certainly haven't used it to write an entire article. I have used it. I will tell you I've used it to take an article and turn it into a Twitter thread and then revised it. I think that's smart. Because you know what? I would use a social media person to do that. But by having it do that, then I can still infuse my stuff in there, and I'm still a bit more hands-on than if I gave it to somebody else and just had it, going on in the background. So again, we're still so new to this that you're going to have to figure out what you want to do with it versus what you don't. And I think everybody's going to figure that. I've used it for recipes. I've used it for crap, I have this in the fridge. What can I make with chicken that has, here you go. I'm like, great, simple recipe. And then you get more, but I want to make it an air fryer recipe. Okay, do this. And you know what? Here's the thing. If you want to know how good ChatGPT, even 4.0, which is out right now, is when it comes to most things, ask it to write you a simple recipe using basic ingredients. And you know what you'll get? An okay meal. You won't get a great meal and you won't get a bad meal. You'll get an okay meal. And if that's what you want, in certain instances, that's there's a reason why. I mean, you've been sitting here and I've been drinking my shake. Every morning I have a NutriBullet shake. That's formulaic, right? I'm trying to do the same thing for lunches so that I can, get in better shape. It can help with that. You can even, I've had friends ask it for workout routines. I've used it to input into just experimenting, going, I want to do these 5 things per day, 5 days a week, and I have these other responsibilities. Write me a schedule based on that. And I gave it my bedtime, all that. And it did, again, an okay job. It didn't have nuance in mind because it doesn't know it yet. It may get there. But the thing is, and by the way, it does get more nuance the more you use it because it's learning from you. So it is a very intriguing area. And I think that leveraged properly, again, my brother used to work, he was a kitchen manager. I said, you could use it to, we over-ordered asparagus. Come up with 5 asparagus recipes that I can use in my kitchen. You could do that, right? And that would be a smart use case, right? I think that there's lots of potential. But again, like anything, it's the frequency of use, the detail involved, and then also who's doing it. It's someone goes, well, it could be in the hands of the wrong people. It could go bad. Yeah, but that's with anything. We have to understand that that's with anything. That's why you have black hat hackers and white hat hackers, right? There's in the hands of individuals, and it's always human, which goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, which was, what hasn't changed? Human behavior hasn't changed over the years of GTD and earlier. Human behavior has generally not changed when it comes to how they do things, why they do things, why they don't do things. And productivity is just a part of that puzzle that, you and I have just happened to dwell in for the past going on 15 years now.
So 2 things I want to say on that,
sure.
To put a bow tie on this. One is because you and I have been around for so long, ChatGPT has all this knowledge about you and I, right? So we can actually have it say, hey, I want you to write a blog post about the Pomodoro technique and do it in the voice of Mike Vardy and add in a funny joke about the Bengals. Yep. And it will do that because it's been, trained on all this content that we've been creating for, over a decade now,
yep.
which is beautiful, which is a funny advantage in many ways that you and I have being around a little bit longer, also have been written text in that form.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, I don't know if this will make you feel old or not, Mike, but this is a realization I had recently, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together until recently, is if we look nowadays at the influencers, or, they don't like that term. They always like to call themselves content creators on Instagram and TikTok, and they're making a living now. When you think about it, you and I were the OG content creators. You and I were the OG influencers. When we wrote blog posts, that's how we made a living. When we did our writing online, that's how we made a living. We were among the first to do that. And nowadays, it's just a different form, right? People create short form videos. They create beautiful pictures and, give different tips about whatever they're talking about on a different platform like Instagram or TikTok or whatever. But you and I did that on our own websites where we had to learn how to set up the technology, the back end, move an image to left centered. And, it was a lot more work back then.
Yeah,
but we were the OGs.
It's true. And I mean, we didn't have social media nearly as much to help us. We certainly didn't have YouTube and TikTok. You know what? Okay, here's the last question before we wrap up. If you were to start, if you had all the tools that exist now, so all the platforms, where is the one medium you would have started with? Would you have stuck with the blog, or what would you start with in terms of content creation, and why?
If I had to start all over again today,
but with the audience that we had back then. So let's time travel and say everything that exists now existed then. So the playing field is completely level. Because if you're going to start now, then we're playing like you and I going into YouTube right now. Yes, we can leverage our experience and the content we've created in the past, but we certainly can't. Like Ali Abdaal is a great example who just shot to the top with YouTube talking about productivity. We're playing catch up there. Not that matters, but the point is, if the playing field's level and we're starting back then with all the tools, where would you start?
So I would still start with video because video can be turned into audio and it can be turned into text. But the other way is not true.
It's true. Yeah, it's the Asian efficiency model. There you go. It's the efficiency model. It's true, though. We're recording this audio right now, and people are like, oh, put the video up. I'm like, we record the video, sure. But the thing is that back when we started, remember when, back when podcasting and then YouTube showed up, they're like, oh, you should just put your podcast on YouTube. And no one was watching podcasts on YouTube. Nobody. Now, yeah, Rich Roll, Joe Rogan, a bunch of others, the minimalists, people will watch an entire podcast, or they'll have it on and playing while they're doing something else, but the video is there. You're right. It's literally content Xing 3 times, at least, probably more with social, right?
Yeah, no, with even, with make.com, I've seen some really interesting workflows where you can literally add a video into a Google Drive folder. It will then get a transcript created from that, right? And then through APIs with make.com, which is kind of like Zapier in a way, it can then send stuff to ChatGPT and say, hey, based on this transcript, create a Twitter thread, create a YouTube description, split this video segment into 3 different transcripts, and then we can edit that. It's insane what we can do nowadays.
Well, this has been one epic episode, a 2-parter for sure. And Dan, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Where can people keep up with you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And feel free to follow me at asianefficiency.com. We have a newsletter there. We also have a podcast called The Productivity Show, so you can check me out there as well.
Thanks for having a productive conversation and a lengthy one of that, a 2-parter. Dan, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Big thanks to Tan for taking the extra time for this conversation. He hadn't been on the show before, and we made up for it in spades. You can check out all of the show notes in the podcast app you're using, or go to productivities.com/podcast480 to check out all the key takeaways, links, etc. etc. And again, if you're listening to this in the podcast app of your choice, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That way you don't miss a single episode of what's to come. And there's plenty more to come as we continue the 480. We're on the march to 500 at this point. I can't believe it. That's how long we've been doing this podcast. The other way that you can help support the show other than subscribing is in the app that you're using right now, or at the link I gave you earlier. Check out the podcast sponsors, the ones that you heard during this episode. If you want to go to all the sponsors that we've had, go to productivities.com/podcast sponsors to learn more, check them out, and then that way they know that I sent you. That's it for this episode. It was a beauty, another great conversation. This one, again, 2 parts. Haven't done that before. I'm glad I did it. Glad I got to do it with Tan. And I can't wait to see what the next decade plus, the next 15 years holds for both of us. And I can't wait to deliver next week's episode for you. So until then, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.